Welcome to the Royal Road School of Carmelite Prayer. St. Teresa of Avila tells us that the divine path of Carmelite prayer is the royal road to heaven, and that those who travel it will be given a great treasure. A link to the Praying with Teresa of Avila website has been provided below to enable you to easily find the Catalogue of Offerings on this channel, along with today's presentation. Vision of Hell, St. Joseph's, chapters 32 and 33 in the Book of Her Life. The website provides all the simple tools you need to develop your own practice of Carmelite or silent prayer, along with complete course materials to start your own school of prayer in your parish or community. The Book of Her Life, the Collected Works of St. Teresa of Avila, Volume 1, Chapters 32, 33, Vision of Hell, St. Joseph's. Chapter 32 discusses how the Lord desired to put her spirit in a place in hell she deserved because of her sins, gives a brief account of what was shown her there, begins to deal with the way in which the Monastery of St. Joseph, where she is now, was founded. While I was in prayer one day, I suddenly found that without knowing how, I had seemingly been put in hell. I understood that the Lord wanted me to see that place the devils had prepared there for me, and which I merited because of my sins. This experience took place within the shortest space of time, but even if I were to live for many years, I think it would be impossible for me to forget it. The entrance, it seemed to me, was similar to a very long and narrow alleyway, like an oven, low and dark and confined. The floor seemed to me to consist of dirty, muddy water, emitting a foul stench and swarming with putrid vermin. At the end of the alleyway, a hole that looked like a small cupboard was hollowed out in the wall. There, I found I was placed in a cramped condition. All of this was delightful to see in comparison with what I felt there. What I felt, it seems, cannot even begin to be exaggerated, nor can it be understood. I experienced a fire in the soul that I don't know how to describe. The bodily pains were so unbearable. I saw, furthermore, that they would go on without end and without ever ceasing. This, however, was nothing next to the soul's agonizing, a constriction, a suffocation, and unhappiness. To say the experience is as though the soul were continually being wrested from the body would be insufficient. It is more that the soul is tearing itself in pieces. The interior fire and despair, in addition to extreme torments and pains. I felt myself burning and crumbling. I repeat that the worst was the interior fire and despair. Unable to hope for any consolation, I found it impossible either to sit or lie down, nor was there any room, even though they put me in this kind of hole in the wall. Those walls closed in on themselves and suffocated everything. There was no light, but all was enveloped in the blackest darkness, yet everything painful to see was visible. The Lord didn't want me to see any more of hell at that time. I saw another vision of frightful things, the punishment of some vices. I don't know how such an experience is possible, but I well understood that it was a great favor, and the Lord wanted me to see with my own eyes the place His mercy had freed me from. In sum, being burned on earth is very little when compared to being burned by the fire that is there. I recall no time of trial or suffering in which it doesn't seem to me that everything that can be suffered here on earth is nothing. So I think in a way we complain without reason. Hence, I repeat that this experience was one of the greatest favors the Lord granted me, because it helped me very much to lose fear of the tribulations and contradictions of this life, as well as to grow strong enough to suffer them and to give thanks to the Lord who freed me from such everlasting and terrible evils. Since that time, everything seems to me easy when compared to undergoing what I suffered there in hell. How obvious it is that you love me much more than I did myself. How many times, my Lord, have you freed me from so dark a prison, and how often have I put myself in it again against your will? From this experience also flows the great impulse to help souls. It seems certain to me that in order to free one from such appalling torments, I would suffer many deaths very willingly. If we see a person we love here below with a great trial or suffering, our own nature invites us to compassion. Well, who is there who cannot suffer seeing a soul in the supreme trial of trials that has no end? No heart can bear it without great pain. For if here on earth, knowing life will end, we are still moved to so much compassion, I don't know how we can rest when we see how the devil brings so many souls each day with himself to hell. I see the place the devils had already prepared for me. It was a terrible torment. It's a dangerous thing to be satisfied with ourselves, nor should the soul that falls at every step into mortal sin be at rest or content. But for the love of God, we should avoid the occasions. The Lord will help us as he did me. May it please the Lord not to let me out of his hand. The Lord showed me the glory he will give to the good and the suffering that will go to the evil. I was anxious to know the manner and the way in which I could do penance for so much evil. I was desiring to flee people and withdraw completely from the world. My spirit was not at rest, yet the disquiet, a delightful one. I was thinking about what I could do for God, and I thought that the first thing was to follow the call to the religious life, and by keeping my rule as perfectly as I could. The rule was observed according to the bulle of mitigation, and the monastery had a lot of comfort. But this disadvantage of going out was now a serious one. If we couldn't be nuns like the Discalced, it would still be possible to found a monastery. Since I was having these desires, I began to discuss the matter with that lady companion of mine, the widow, who had the same desires. She began to draw up plans to provide the new house with income. There was little chance these plans would succeed, but our desires made us think they would. Yet I was so perfectly content in the house in which I was, because it was very much to my liking, and the cell in which I lived was just what I wanted, so I was still delaying. But we agreed to pray fervently to God over the matter. One day after communion, His Majesty earnestly commanded me to strive for this new monastery with all my powers, and he made great promises that it would be founded and that he would be highly served in it. He said it would be called St. Joseph, and that this saint would watch over us at one door and Our Lady at the other, that Christ would remain with us, and that it would be a star shining with great splendor. He said that even though religious orders were mitigated, one shouldn't think he was little served in them. He asked what would become of the world if it were not for religious, and said that I should tell my confessor what he commanded, and that he was making him not to go against this or hinder me from doing it. This vision and locution had such effects that I couldn't doubt it was from God. I felt the severest pain because the terrible trials the new monastery would cost me were partly represented to me, and I was very happy in my own monastery. Although I'd been discussing it, I hadn't done so with determination. The determination needed to bring it about. I saw I would be starting something that would disturb my calm and was doubtful about what to do. But the Lord returned often to speak to me about this new monastery, presenting me with clear reasons and arguments that I saw it was His will and could no longer help but tell my confessor. I told him in writing. It wasn't feasible from the point of view of natural reason, since my companion had little means for it. So my confessor told me to discuss it with my superior and to do what he advised. My companion spoke with the provincial. He assented very readily and told her he would accept the house under his jurisdiction. They discussed the income needed, and for many reasons we never desired that we would have more than 13 nuns. The Holy Friar Peter of Alcantara counseled us not to fail to make the foundation. The knowledge of it began to spread throughout the city, and a great persecution came upon us. Gossip, derision, saying that it was foolishness. They said I was well off in my own monastery. It seemed to me that they were partly right. Very wearied, His Majesty began to console and encourage me. He told me I would see what the saints who had founded religious orders had suffered, that I would have to suffer much more persecution than I could imagine. He told me some things to tell my companion, and we were left consoled and with the courage to withstand all. The project seemed to almost everyone in the city to be a lot of nonsense. Everything was such an outcry in my own monastery that the provincial changed his mind. He said the income was not secure, that it was small, and that there was strong opposition. It seemed he was right. He finally abandoned the project, and his refusal was most painful. My companion went to a most learned man of the Order of St. Dominic, as it was said to be just one of our own whims. This lady told the holy man everything and of the income from her estate. I didn't say anything to him about a revelation, but mentioned only the natural reasons. He told us to give him a period of 8 days to answer, and asked if we were determined to do what he would tell us. I told him we were. Never did the assurance leave me that the foundation would be made. I thought it would be impossible to give up the project, since it didn't go against sacred scripture or against the law of the Church. The revelation was true. This servant of God told me later that he was fully determined to insist that we give up the foundation. But when he began to consider his answer to us, he felt assured it would be very much in the service of God, and that we shouldn't fail to go ahead with it. He told us to hurry to bring the project to a conclusion, and he mentioned the way in which it should be done. He said that though the estate was small, we had to put our trust in God, and that anyone who would oppose the plan should come to him, and that he would answer. We were very consoled by his reply. On account of his help, some holy persons, usually opposed to us, were more satisfied, and some helped us. Among them was the holy gentleman who I already mentioned, to whom it seemed our plan bore promise of great perfection, since our whole basis was prayer. Yet the means seemed difficult and impractical to him. But he felt it could be something from God. It seemed the Lord himself moved him to this, and the Lord did the same to the master, the cleric I mentioned, an example to the entire city. He agreed to help me in the project. Having already bought the house, I didn't worry about it being small. The Lord told me to get started as best I could, that afterward I would see what His Majesty would do, and how well I have seen it. Though the income was small, I believe the Lord would help us arrange things through other means. Chapter 33 continues on the same subject about the foundation dedicated to the glorious Saint Joseph. Tells how she was ordered not to become involved with the project, of the time she abandoned it, of some trials she had, and of how the Lord consoled her. When the business matters had reached this state, and in other days the deeds were drawn up and the matter concluded, our Father Provincial changed his mind. I believe it was providential. The Lord was perfecting the work and ordaining it to be done in another way. Because my provincial didn't want to receive the house under his jurisdiction, my confessor ordered me not to be involved with the foundation, in spite of the trials and afflictions it had cost me. Even though my provincial had ordered me to do what I had done thus far, the conviction became greater that it was all the foolishness of women, and the criticism of me increased. I was very much disliked throughout my monastery, because I had wanted to found a more enclosed monastery. They said that I was insulting them, that I could also serve God in my own monastery, since there were others in it better than I. Several of them said that I should be thrown into a prison cell. I saw that in many matters my opponents were right. I couldn't mention the main factor, which was that the Lord had commanded me to do this. I remained silent. God granted me the great favor that none of this disturbed me. Rather, I gave up the plan, with as much ease as I would have if it hadn't cost me anything. No one could believe this, not even my confessor. But I felt that I had done everything I could, and could never stop believing that the foundation would come about. In fact, I was certain that it would. What caused me the greatest anguish was that something my confessor had written to me. The Lord also must have desired that in that area which would be most painful to me, I wouldn't be lacking a trial. So in the midst of this multitude of persecutions, when I thought comfort would be coming from him, he wrote me that I should be able to see from what happened that the project had been all a dream. What he said grieved me more than anything put together, since if I had been at fault for some offense against God, and if these visions had been an illusion, then all the prayer I had experienced was self-deception, and I was being misled and going astray. I was thrown into complete confusion. But the Lord often consoled and fortified me, and told me not to be anxious, that I had served God and not offended him, and that I should do what my confessor ordered me to do, by being silent until it would come time to return to the task. I was left consoled. In this way the Lord taught me what a tremendous good it is to suffer trials and persecutions for him. There was an increase of love of God in my soul, that made me unable to stop desiring trials. I would have been ashamed if the Lord hadn't favored me. The impulse of love began to grow in intensity, and the raptures became greater, although I remained silent. The holy Dominican friar still thought it certain, as did I, that the foundation would be made. He and my companion wrote to Rome to start negotiation for it. The devil, through one person and another, made it known that I had received some revelation about this work. Some persons came to me with great fear that I be reported to the inquisitors. This amused me and made me laugh, for I had never had any fear of such a possibility. If anyone were to see that I went against the Church, I knew that I would die 1,000 deaths for the faith or sacred scripture, and it would be bad for my soul if I should have to fear the Inquisition. If I thought I did have something to fear, I'd go myself to seek out the Inquisitor, and that if I were accused, the Lord would free me. I discussed with my Dominican father my visions and the manner of prayer, and the great favors the Lord granted me. He assured me very much, and it benefited him, because from then on he dedicated himself much more to prayer, and withdrew to a monastery for more than 2 years to practice prayer better. I felt it very much when he went away. The Lord told me that I should be consoled and not troubled, as he was being well guided. When he came back, he consoled me not only with his learning, but now he did so also through his spiritual experience, for he was receiving a number of supernatural experiences. God had brought him at the time when His Majesty saw there was a need for help in the work of founding this monastery His Majesty desired. Well, for 5 or 6 months I remained silent, but I could never get it out of my mind that the foundation would be accomplished. The rector of the Society of Jesus was transferred, and the Lord brought another very spiritual one. I was in dire need. My confessor, although he knew my spirit well, would not stir, unless he knew, as all members of the society, that it was in conformity with the superior's will. My spirit was moving with such great impulses of love that it felt keenly its bondage, but didn't venture beyond what he commanded me. One day, greatly troubled that my confessor didn't believe me, the Lord told me that the afflictions would soon end. I rejoiced deeply, thinking I was soon to die. But afterwards I saw clearly he had referred to the arrival of this rector, who didn't restrain my confessor, but told him to console me, and let the Spirit of God work. For at times it seemed with these great spiritual impulses that my soul couldn't even breathe. This new rector came to see me. My confessor ordered me to speak to him in all freedom and clarity. When I entered the confessional, I felt a spiritual joy and understanding that his soul would understand mine, and mine would be in harmony with his. Afterward, I saw that my spirit was not deceived. His method is to detach the soul from everything and to mortify it. I immediately understood his style and saw that his soul was a pure and holy one, and that he had a special gift from the Lord for discerning spirits. A little while later, the Lord urged me to take up once more the matter of the monastery and to give my confessor and this rector many reasons why they shouldn't impede me from the work. After much reflection, they didn't dare venture to hinder me from carrying out this work. My confessor gave me permission again to dedicate myself entirely to this foundation. I was very much alone and had hardly any means. We agreed to carry on in total secrecy. I got one of my sisters to buy the house and fix it up as though it were for her, with money the Lord provided. I took great care not to do anything against obedience, but I knew that if I said anything to my superiors, all would be lost, as happened the previous time. I went through so many trials, sometimes in distress. I said, "My Lord, how is it you command things that seem impossible? For if I were at least free, even though I am a woman, but bound on so many sides, without money or the means to raise it, or to obtain the brief or anything, what can I do, Lord?" Once when in need, I didn't know how to pay some workmen. St. Joseph appeared to me and revealed that I would not be lacking and that I should hire them. And so I did, without a penny, and the Lord provided for me. The house struck me as being very small, not adequate for a monastery, and I wanted to buy the house next to it, also small, to serve as a church. One day after communion, the Lord said, "I have already told you to enter as best you can." I went to the little house and drew up plans and found that though small, it was perfect for a monastery. I arranged to have it fixed up so that it could be lived in. On her feast day, while going to communion, St. Clare appeared to me. She told me to take courage and that she would help me. A nearby monastery of her nuns helps sustain us, and little by little she brought the desire of mine to perfection, that the poverty practiced in her house is practiced in this one. For it cost me no small amount of trouble that this observation of poverty would have the backing of the Holy Father, and that there would never be any income without any request. Our Lord fully provides what is necessary for us. On one of these same days, while at the monastery of the Order of St. Dominic, a rapture came upon me so great that it almost took me out of myself. It seems to me that while in this state I saw myself vested in a white robe of shining brightness. Our Lady was at my right side and St. Joseph at my left, and they were putting that robe on me. I was given to understand that I was now cleansed of all my sins. It seemed that Our Lady took me by the hands. She told me that I made her very happy in serving St. Joseph, and that the monastery would be accomplished, and that they would watch over us, and as a sign that this was true, she gave me a jewel. It seems she placed around my neck a very beautiful golden necklace with attached a valuable cross. The beauty I saw in Our Lady was extraordinary. I didn't see St. Joseph so clearly. Our Lady seemed to be a very young girl. I didn't want it to come to an end. Then it seems I saw them ascend to heaven. I was left in deep loneliness. I remained some time without being able to stir. I was left with an impulse to be dissolved for God. I could never doubt that the vision was from God. It left me comforted and with great peace. As for what the Queen of Angels said about obedience, it distressed me not to give obedience to the order. The Lord told me I should petition Rome in a certain way, and that He would take care that we get our request. And so it came about easily. It was very fortunate the obedience was given to the bishop. May he be blessed. Amen.